Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be talking about Blizzard announcing in a Q&A in BlizzCon that they might actually be taking off a lot more abilities off of the GCD. It's actually pretty crazy to see developers reversing some of these, but not all of them. What they are trying to hit on are what looks like utility abilities as well as movement based. So in this video I just want to cover all the abilities that are still on the list to be changed from GCD to off GCD, or at least changed back to off GCD how we originally had it in Legion, and how it might or might not affect the gameplay, as well as give you guys some ideas of what are the other abilities I think also should be off the GCD. Anyway, without further ado, let's just jump into the video. So if you are not aware, what is GCD? GCD stands for Global Cooldown, and it basically slows down the gameplay of abilities, not letting players spam some of these abilities. As of Legion, for the most part, it was used for offensive abilities, like Rogue's Backstab, for example. When you press Backstab, a lot of your abilities go into this clock-like animation where there's a short moment where you can't use any of those abilities. Any of the offensive abilities that are part of your regular rotation most of them are going to be on GCD. And then there's abilities that are off GCD that can be used separately or at the same time as certain other abilities. This allows for a bit more class complexity, and it's different depending on the class as well as the spec. As of Battle for Azeroth compared to Legion, a lot more abilities were added to the GCD. Whether it's good for the game or bad for the game, a lot of people noticed that some classes in certain specs started to feel clunky. Blizzard had to take control of the situation and had to adjust and change certain classes in terms of how they play, adjust their abilities, and mostly adjust the big offensive cooldowns. But to this day, still, the GCD is a topic of conversation from time to time. I feel like majority of the community have accepted the GCD of certain abilities, but even in my day-to-day life, whether I'm doing raids, dungeons, or PvP, sometimes I still hear people complaining about GCD. For a class like Rogue, it hasn't affected me as heavily, but then there's other classes, tanks, DPS, and healers, where every single GCD starts to really matter, and the gameplay that you get by having so many abilities on GCD, a lot of people would describe as simply not fun. At BlizzCon, Blizzard decided to do a Q&A, and in the Q&A they got a question about abilities on GCD. They stated that some mobility abilities as well as utility will be taken off of the GCD in order to improve the cohesiveness of the gameplay. So in this video, I want to take a look at all the different changes that they have planned so far that we can find on Wowhead, and think of some of the other abilities that maybe could be taken off GCD depending by Blizzard's stance. One of the aspects of abilities that Blizzard wants to take off the GCD are movement based. The ones are Vengeful Retreat for Havoc Demon Hunters, Wild Charge for all specs of Druid, Harpoon for Survival Hunters, not Outlaw Rogues, Feral Lunge for Enhancement Shaman, Charge for Fury and Arms Warriors, as well as Intercept for Protection Warrior. Now, as an Outlaw Rogue main, I can already tell you, having an ability like Grappling Hook, for example, of the GCD allows so much more to the gameplay. It doesn't feel punishing, it actually feels kind of exciting to have some sort of a reaction time. I can use Grappling Hook while trying to get away from an enemy and pop in a concoction at the same time. I can be using Grapple Hook and then stunning an enemy as I whiz by them. And if I were to have something like that taken away from me, where I have to make a choice whether I want to use mobility or defenses or utility or crowd control or damage abilities, I just feel that the spec will start to feel really bad and rigid. So taking a look at some of these other classes that are mobile oriented, like Demon Hunters, for example, Survival Hunters, Warriors, and to have those abilities on GCD, I feel like stifles a lot of the fast-paced gameplay. I don't think that this change on mobility abilities is going to be enough to make these classes feel a lot faster all over again, but it's a nice step in the right direction, and hopefully we'll start seeing stuff like this coming into PTR, and a lot of classes will start to feel a little bit more fluid. Another region of abilities that Blizzard wants to take off the GCD are utility-based abilities. Utility is a broad term, and anything I think could be utility. Crowd control can be a utility. Being able to redirect threat can be utility. Being able to pop a raid-wide defensive, even though you're not a healer, can be a utility. It's anything that you bring to the team. So some of the abilities they're thinking of taking off GCD is something like Death Grip for Death Knights, Darkness for Havoc Demon Hunters, Innervate for Balance and Restore Druids, Binding Shot for Hunters, Vampiric Embrace for Shadow Priest, Tremor Totem for Shamans, and Rallying Cry for Warriors. I like this list because you know what I see out of this list? All these abilities are clutch abilities. If you have that clutch moment in PvP or PvE, you're about to die, your team is about to go down, and then a warrior pops a rallying cry at the same time instead of feeling like he's getting GCD'd, then your team might be able to get out of the fight and eventually kill the raid boss. Or if you're doing PvP and being able to hit that tremor totem on cooldown as soon as the ally gets hit with a fear, I feel like can actually turn a lot of the gameplay and reward gameplay where players are active, where they're trying to be proactive in a sense, where they're trying to mitigate as soon as possible. And I think this is awesome. For example, like abilities like Vampiric Embrace is almost like a defensive for Shadow Priest. I know that their main defensive is really Dispersion, but Vampiric Embrace is an ability to heal themselves as well as anybody around them. To have to spend a whole global just to activate this, I feel like is a little bit much. What Blizzard originally wanted to do with these utility-based abilities is to make them matter more and make them feel more crucial. To have to sacrifice your own damage so you can spend a global to protect your allies, or fuel the healer full of mana, or apply a little bit extra healing even though you're not really a healer type of a spec. They wanted to make it feel more special, more powerful, more important, but instead it ended up feeling kind of clunky. It sacrificed at the cost of the DPS rotation, making certain DPS rotations less smooth. And it just wasn't a great way of going about it. I don't even know how Blizzard could have done it to make all these abilities matter a bit more. I feel like maybe this should have been like a give and take kind of system. For example, if a warrior is using Rallying Cry, maybe they should be able to get some kind of a buff. Maybe they should be rewarded with like energy or focus or something. Maybe they should be able to get some kind of a stack for certain utilities so they can kind of use Rallying Cry, for example, to save their team, but not in a way where it interrupts your rotation and the pacing of your class. But the best way of going about it is to simply have all those important abilities of the GCD, so you can have access to them at a clutch moment's notice, which feels a lot better and doesn't conflict with the rotation itself. Now, Blizzard didn't say that this is all the different abilities that are going to be on the GCD, though it's probably going to be a lot more, so if you guys got any ideas, I feel like it's a good time to hit up the forums. My personal take is, I feel like raid buffs, if any abilities at all, should also be off GCD. Trust me, I looked at the list and I couldn't really think of any abilities that they would want to change. Of course, I could say, how about every single offensive ability? But something tells me that that's not exactly what Blizzard is going to do. I think offensive abilities, and Blizzard did say in the Q&A, they're pretty happy where they are at. Although I feel like some are kind of clunky, and certain classes that might feel like, well, I have to just go and use less cooldowns based on my talents in order to have more smooth rotation. I don't want to be sitting here using one power-up button, second power-up button, third power-up button. Finally, now I can start doing damage. But if anything, I think raid buffs should be something that is off the GCD. Certain classes have the raid buffs pretty easy, or rather raid debuffs. If you're a monk or a demon hunter, just before hitting an enemy, you apply a debuff on them to make them take more physical damage or more magical damage. But if you are a mage or a priest or a warrior, you still have to spend a global to apply a buff for your allies. If you're doing Mythic Plus dungeons or raids or PvP, and let's say there's a moment where somebody gets a battle res, that means every single one of those classes that's a warrior, priest, or a mage now needs to interrupt their rotation, interrupt their procs, to make sure to give you the necessary buffs, whether it is a stamina buff for survival, whether it is the warrior buff for physical damage increase, or the mage buff for magical damage increase. But if you take off these abilities off the GCD, if Arms Warrior can still get that sweet execute in there while at the same time popping Battle Shout to make sure their ally is buffed. Again, it goes back to smoothing out the rotation by making all these key important abilities ready at a moment's use rather than locking them down to the GCD. Some of my final thoughts, I feel like eventually Blizzard is going to start taking even more abilities off the GCD. I feel when your basic general rotation has a lot of abilities on GCD, it makes for at least some sort of a setup. You have certain set of abilities that you use in a particular order. To have certain classes with a few abilities of the GCD, like Subtlety Rogues and Symbols of Death for example, does feel kind of fun and exciting and integral to the gameplay. But when you have a lot of the offensive abilities, defensive abilities, and utilities, it just starts to kind of impede in between of your main character rotation. I'm kind of glad that Blizzard is starting to take steps forward, and I do wonder how much further are they going to go. Are they going to completely reverse all the different things and changes they've done with classes and GCD thus far, or is it just one of those small changes that they will make but they won't go any further than that? Very interested to see how that's going to pan out, and if you guys do have PTR, but I would say it's a good idea to download it, because I feel like after BlizzCon we might be getting a few more updates on patch 8.1 on PTR, and you guys might be able to test all your classes to see if they feel any less clunky or any more exciting, any more interesting with everything else that is to come. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. I have a lot more BFA videos to make, so I'm going to sign off here. But as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like some more videos to reach a wider audience. You guys know the gist. Comment down below, because I will be reading a lot of my videos and commenting and hanging out with you guys and chatting with you in the comments best as I can, trying to get as much information from you. As always, if you guys enjoyed, subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next one.